What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Fantasy Golf Bag Podcast. I'm your host, Redkacheek. This week is the John Deere Classic. I am recording this on Monday, and the playoff for Viktor Hovland versus Scheffler just teed off. Both are in the fairway on the first playoff hole. So obviously we have a ticket on Hovland, and to be quite frank, a lot of DFS is riding on the move. If Hovland wins, keeps his first placement points, Scheffler loses them, or vice versa. So there could be a huge swing in DFS, unfortunately, on top of the outright for Hovland. So it feels inevitable that Scheffler's going to win. Unless somehow Scheffler doesn't make a birdie and Hovland can soon or like early, eventually I think Scheffler comes out on top. So we'll see how it shakes out. I predict a couple pars or maybe a couple birdies to tie, and then eventually Scheffler's going to birdie and Hovland's going to make a par. But we're rooting for Hovland. So I'll keep this podcast short. I was off last week, and we have a new betting show called Green Reading. That's on Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. So definitely check that out. And honestly, looking through last week's event and the course, most TPC courses are very similar anyways. The John Deere Classic, TPC Deere Run was the number one most correlated course with the Travelers and vice versa. So we're going to basically talk about the same stuff. So I don't foresee this being a super long podcast. And then we go through a decent stretch to wrap up kind of the major swing season, I guess. So with that being said, let's hop into talking about the John Deere Classic. And what I want to do first is we'll highlight a couple things. Actually, before we even do that, for LineupIQ this week, Wimbledon just kicked off. We sent an email out last night. So if you are a Fantasy Golf Bag subscriber and have access to obviously all the tools, but LineupIQ has MMA and tennis. All the tennis slates will be loaded. Field lineups will be loaded. Contest sims, projections, our own projections, etc. So you can play that all week. It's a pretty fun sweat, honestly. It's usually these are big slates, so they'll take all day, which is kind of the worst part about it. But you can kind of follow along each match. It's really fun. I think it's really fun anyway. So obviously golf is very long, even for Showdown. A lot of things happen. With tennis, the ceiling for, the biggest favorite or a 50-50 favorite is the same. Like they can only win so many games, so many sets. So the lineup construction is very unique. I think people misplay it a bit. So just wanted to point that out. So as we go through this, though, I did want to point out a couple improvements. So like if you go type in the John Deere Classic, if this will show, okay. The screen is glitching out a little bit. Yeah, I think you can see it now. Okay. So each of the years, the prior 5 years will populate. So if you want to go jump to anything specific, so now you can do that, or you can click more. It'll just open up the full tournament. So like if we go to look at just last year's 2025 John Deere Classic, I'll pull myself off of here like that. We can go through and look at the event analytics for the driving distance, the approach shot distributions, wave splits as well. So you can see AM is significantly easier for most of these rounds than the PM. And then you can also see what won this event. So like, off the tee for Brian Campbell was pretty atrocious versus his approach play and putting was big. And then you can look at the top 10 and go through the leaderboard. Same stuff we always do. So like I said, I'm not going to spend a ton of time because this is a weak field. The course, everything about the course pretty much is identical to TPC River Highlands. So we're going to jump right into the course summary and talk about this. So again, TPC Deere Run, par 71, 73-27. It's kind of misleading though on the 73-27. You can come down here, look at the approach shots. There's plenty of wedges. There's a decent mix of, mid irons, not a ton of mid long irons. And then a good handful over 200 plus as far as the par fives go. So even though this is 73K, 7,300, 73K, 7,300 on the scorecard. It's really not that long of a golf course as far as the approach play goes. A couple of the interesting things as we look through this, the average drive on the PGA Tour is 302. The average drive here is 305. The interesting thing is the driving accuracy goes way up, about 5%. I'm getting all these notifications for WoW about Scotty. So I guess something happened. Fantastic. I don't want to look. Driving profile favors accuracy last year. If we go through each of the years, it tends to favor accuracy or balance. Like bombers just don't have a huge edge on this golf course. Plenty of drivers. They're all hitting it to the same spot. So you can see the driving distribution here. We have 9 tee shots between 290 and 310. We got a couple in every bucket, really. 230 to 230, 230 to 250. We have 1, 250 to 270. We have 1, 270 to 290. We have 2, and then 310 plus. That is hole number 2, averaging 315 yards. There's 1 tee shot there as well. So a lot of tee shots, a lot of drivers, 290 to 310. Interestingly enough, if you go back and look at the winners here, Campbell, Davis Thompson, Sepp Straka, JT Poston, Lucas Glover, Dylan Fratelli, Michael Kim, Bryson, Ryan Moore, Jordan Spieth, Brian Harmon. There's a mix of guys that are not long off the tee. There's also a mix of guys that aren't super straight off the tee. This kind of brings everything together. And you'll see how the, basically approach play and putting is a big factor in this golf course. I'll jump right down to the bottom really quickly and we'll talk about each of these specific aspects. So this was the chart basically from last week with TPC Deere Run being number 1 with TPC River Highlands. We see basically an identical match, which makes sense, obviously, being the same course against the same course. So TPC River Highlands is our number 1 comp course for TPC Deere Run. Now, there's not a lot of carryover, if any. I don't recall some of the weaker players last week that are playing this week. But going back however many years, TPC Deere Run does correlate very highly with TPC River Highlands in terms of the course setup. Going through a couple the key aspects. Importance of hitting the fairway, a bit more important than an average PGA Tour course. Makes sense. There's going to be a lot of birdies playing from the fairway on an already easy to hit fairways golf course. That's very important. So looking at those courses that are, basically a bit of a bigger penalty for missing the fairway. Driving distance is less than a PGA Tour average course. Makes sense. And then the difficulty of the hitting fairway is 22nd percentile. So pretty easy. Again, this favors accuracy, not bombers, but all these players are going to be hitting plenty of fairways, which I kind of find interesting. Generally speaking, you would think when the driving accuracy goes up, bombers tend to have a leg up at least because now they're able to hit more fairways and still keep their distance edge. But there's really no big advantage to driving distance on any of these holes. Going to the approach buckets we talked about already. Difficulty of hitting the green is 17th percentile. Very easy to hit these greens. Importance of hitting the green, very important. Obviously, you got to make a lot of birdies. And then proximity to the hole is basically tour average. So nothing crazy there. Looking through the prior leaderboards and how those players did, Brian Campbell's kind of a weird outlier where he's just so short off the tee. His off the tee number was atrocious leading in and was atrocious that week. And he still was able to come out on top. Most of these players gain a little bit off the tee, gain a little bit on approach. Again, a weak field. So you'll see a lot of discrepancy in approach. Putting as well. There's some variability there. Off the tee, I think, is probably the most stable, generally speaking. Doesn't mean you're a bomber. Just means that you're gaining the most relative to the field, whether that's through distance. It's usually a combination of distance and accuracy. So again, not a super interesting golf course. It's very plain. All of our lead-in stats are going to be exactly the same. We're going to jump into FGB Studio, and I wanted to bring up a couple important topics. So we'll load in the the data from this past week as soon as this Scheffler playoff gets done. The sample size is going to be interesting. So as you can see, I already loaded in our model that we ran last week. I'm just going to run the exact same thing. I might tinker with some weights, but broadly speaking, this should be nearly identical. You can see number one is Jackson Koiven, which is not a, like, I guess a slap in the face of how bad this model could be. But as we go through this, you can start to see some of these sample size. So like 8 weeks, Jackson Koiven moves down. He's only had 4 rounds, basically the U.S. Open. You go back to 9 months, Jackson Koiven, 4 rounds. And again, he played great in the U.S. Open. So the field adjusted numbers are going to be great. 12 months, he is at 20 rounds, so a bit more in the last year because he's played a few more PGA Tour events. And then 2 years, he is at 30 rounds. The reason I bring that up is if he is popping with 4 rounds, I want to consider it, but I also don't want to give too much weight to just 4 rounds. Like I don't think it's possible he could be number one in your model this week. I don't think that's a fair assessment, but it's probably, I mean, he should probably be in the top 10. My goal would be to go down here to the min rounds and look at cutting him out of these basically in the last 9 months with small sample size. And there's going to be other players too that's going to fit the same bucket. So when I do that and I go to the overall look, now that knocks him way down. And we have Tom Kim number 1, Jordan Spieth number 2, Ben Coles, JT Poston, Keegan Bradley. A bit more reasonable for a PGA Tour, caliber players that are playing week in and week out versus Koiven. And Koiven's going to be a great player on the PGA Tour. Don't get me wrong. But as far as accuracy goes, when we run our normal FGB model for any of our projections or the outright model, live model, etc., there's a dock to limited sample size. I would encourage you to do the same thing here. Now, going back through any of these rounds, you can wait, 12 months a little bit higher, give him a bump up. But that is probably my biggest tip, I guess, this week is watch sample size for especially Koiven, because he popped so much based on his performance at the U.S. Open. He's probably the highest finisher at the U.S. Open that's in this field, to be completely honest. And that's a big reason for those 4 rounds moving him up so high in 8 weeks, 6 months, 9 months. But I mean, still 12 months, he is number 2. It's small sample size relative, but like 20 rounds we can work with. I was mostly concerned with the super recent form. So with him knocking out, so again, just keep in mind, Koiven, wherever they price him, is a great play. I'm sure he's going to drive some ownership. He's probably a fantastic bet this week as well, depending on where his odds come in, obviously. But I do think he has a very good chance of winning in this type of field on this type of golf course, being aggressive like he does. That being said, we have no DK pricing loaded right now. We have Tom Kim. I'll just read off the top 10 guys, and then we'll kind of like highlight some interesting names that probably show up. Tom Kim, number 1, then Jordan Spieth, Ben Coles, JT Poston, Keegan Bradley, Keith Mitchell, Ben Griffin, Jacob Bridgman, Chris Goddard, and Sudarshan Yelamaraju. Some names that are just outside the top 10 that drive some interest for me. Jackson Suber sits at 14th. He's playing really well. You can kind of see his trend here of 9 months to 6 months to 8 weeks. He's actually number 1 in the 8-week model. Eric Cole as well. He's been hovering around top 10 the last 3 sample sizes, 9 months, 6 months, 8 weeks. I think Eric Cole's another good fit here, especially for a guy that's been losing strokes off the tee due to driving accuracy issues. This would be the spot to play a little bit more Eric Cole, in my opinion. So Eric Cole, Jackson Suber, going down a little bit more, Ricky Fowler in this field. He's been struggling a bit. I think this is a good get-right spot for him. Again, relative to the field, this is between him and, honestly, Michael Kim's right there too. Both of them are really good options for this week. Andrew Novak finished up well at Travelers, so keep an eye on him. Not sure this is the best course fit, but he's definitely playing a bit better. Blades Brown, 28th here. would probably be betting him too. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, Blades Brown, like you can go look at his profile. He's been playing on the Corn Ferry Tour, and you can see how consistent he's been. I'll let that load for a second. I think I got several processes running in the background. So you can see he had a rough week last week at the Memorial Health, lost 5 strokes on approach. Not overly concerning, but you can see how consistent he's been ball striking wise, off the tee and approach in all of these Corn Ferry Tour events. Would say even around the green's been pretty good. Just really putting is where he's been struggling a bit. And the CJ Cup Byron Nelson finished T14th, was his last PGA Tour event. So going down a bit more, William Mao. Let's see. Zach Boucher. A couple names that stick out to me right there. AJ Ewart. I saw some people betting Pot Guider this week already. I don't think I love it. Let's see. Mark Hubbard's kind of trending in the right direction. You can look at his last few rounds. Where's he at? Right here. Overall, bogey avoidance looks good. Tee to green looks really good. He had a rough round 3 at the Charles Schwab Challenge and the Memorial round 2 where he missed the cut. He really played pretty bad at the Memorial. But outside of that, he's been playing really good golf. And again, considering this is such a weak field, give him a bump up in this tournament. We'll go back to the summary. Come down here. Let's just sort by 6 months. Let's just see who's popping the most. That's kind of outside. Greaserman, interesting. Greaserman, Kevin Yu, Bezadenhout makes sense. I'm going to look at Bezadenhout. Pretty rough. Off the tee, up and down, approach, up and down. Interesting. Spectrum gives him a little bit of a benefit, but overall, I mean, not great. Again, we're considering it against this field, and he is relatively good. So I will be playing some Bezadenhout for sure. Let's see. Going down. Any other super intriguing? Haotong Li. He has the upside. He's just been so sporadic. And I don't really, I mean, just talking through this, like there's no real profile that I am looking for at a course like TPC Deere Run. Like I think bombers can be good in other areas. Like you could have Cameron Young here and say he's a bomber, but he's also really good on approach. He's really good with everything else through the bag. I think if I'm looking through a profile here, it's more so for guys that drive it decent relative to the field, obviously. Not strictly looking at bombers, not strictly looking at guys that are straight. It's just kind of overall decent off the tee, give themselves positions, and then looking at their approach from there. I mean, we saw the lead-in stat correlations. It's really just strokes gained tee to green, strokes gained total, bogey or worse, which is bogey avoidance, which is just a really good metric in general. So like I said, whatever you used last week for the Travelers, use the exact same thing, and you're going to be in pretty good shape. Ben Coles. You guys might not be following on Ben Coles too much. I think he has 2 wins already this season on the Corn Ferry Tour. Sorry, 1 win. I thought he had 2. BMW Charity Pro-Am, he won there. He did get into the U.S. Open via qualifying and finished T23 and then T19 last week. So Ben Coles is playing very good golf. Putting is his problem and his spectrum. Putting is still his problem. You can see here some really bad weeks putting, but upside for as good of his iron play is, which has been good for a long time. If you go back to 2025, you can see how consistently good his iron play is. He just can't putt. Like that's his biggest issue. So yeah, I mean, Ben Coles, as far as a ceiling and winning this week, is probably really good. It all is dependent on his putting number or whatever he can do this week. John Deere Classic has not been great to him. So he's got one miscut, 2 made cuts. Nothing better than T44. All right. And like I said, we don't have DK pricing up. It'll be loaded probably this morning whenever they finish, or I guess around 1 p.m. they'll load it. Let's see. And some of these guys are trending in the wrong direction. Doesn't mean I wouldn't play them. Paul Peterson looks interesting. I'm going to click on him. Yeah. He's a guy that if I wanted to profile a player, he is just literally short and mostly accurate. You can see his off the tee numbers are really bad. I would say he has a better chance this week to like do something than on a long golf course, but doesn't mean he's a great play. I'll probably have some in my player pool, but nothing crazy. All right. Any others that are moving in the right direction? Let's look at the last. I mean, a lot of these guys haven't even played in the last 8 weeks because they've been playing the Korn Ferry Tour, which we have their results. But as far as like field strength, the Korn Ferry Tour field strength gets bumped down so much versus PGA Tour, especially US Open, signature field events. If I take out the min rounds real quick and we go look back at it. So obviously Koivin's number 1. Is there anybody else that popped that maybe had less rounds? No, it's really him. Matt Wallace is kind of low. Doesn't look terrible. But yeah, Koivin is just the one that I would not put number 1 based on the sample size. So with that being said, what's Tony Finau doing? Has he been a little bit better? A little bit better. Interesting. All right. Well, I will leave it at that. Like I said, the model I used is identical to the Travelers, so I think you're in good shape there. Or whatever you used last week, if you had a good week. I know we had a really good week in the Discord. You can use the exact same model because the carryover and crossover exactly the same. Even if the players didn't play, it's still the exact same profile as far as what you're looking at. And then check back on Tuesday at 9 p.m. for the betting show. We'll have all the projections up tomorrow, ownership, field lineups, etc. So we're up for another good week. And let's see what happened with this playoff. Since it looks like it might have ended, since I'm seeing screenshots, let's see. Victor Hovland, wow. Victor Hovland birdie's first playoff hole to win Travelers. All right, so we're 2 for 2 on outrights in the last 2 weeks. Good thing. Okay. Well, appreciate you guys tuning in. Best of luck this week. Let's see what we moved. All right. Thanks, guys. Best of luck this week. I know that was chaotic. Trying to juggle with the watching all these notifications pop up on my computer. You guys can't see them, but the last 20 minutes is just a frenzy. So if you're playing Wimbledon, good luck this week. And obviously for the John Deere Classic, reach out if you have any questions. And yeah, FGB Studio, same model as last week. We should be good to go. Yeah.